Welcome to the Plant Fit Summit, bringing you the best in plant-based health and fitness. This is Luke and Toby, and today we have Dr. Linda Carney. Dr. Carney has been practicing medicine since 1986, graduating in the top third of her class at Loma Linda University School of Medicine. Dr. Carney specializes in lifestyle medicine and is also an educator and speaker. Today, Dr. Carney will be delivering a presentation on food, cancer, and hormones. Enjoy the presentation.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Linda Carney, webcasting to you from just south of Austin, Texas, and today we'll be discussing cancer, hormones, diseases, and food. I'm grateful to my husband, Sean Carney, because he's been a big help with this presentation. And I would like to focus on cancer first because it's among the leading causes of death according to the 2015 research. When it comes to females in the United States, it's quickly catching up to heart disease as the leading cause of death in American women. In fact, the Kaiser Permanente Foundation in 8 of the Western states where it sees patients has already listed cancer as the leading cause of death for its patients in those 8 Western states. Cancer has become the number 1 cause of death for some racial groups. And speaking of race, why is it that many Black people with melanoma wait longer for surgery after they're diagnosed? Now, we've known for decades that there's a worse prognosis for Black patients with melanoma. True, it's only about 0.5% of the melanomas that were studied between 2004 and 2015 that occurred in Black patients. But racial disparities persisted when, after they had been diagnosed, when they were for their definitive surgery, racial disparities persisted despite categorizing and controlling for factors such as age, gender, household income, and insurance type. Now, insurance type, if they were Medicaid, they were 5 times more likely, of course, to wait over 90 days for surgery, unless they were stage 4 melanoma. This year in 2020, a spotlight is shining on race, and I would like to take this opportunity at the beginning of my presentation to remind each one of us that we can be a revolution of one in ending racial disparities in healthcare and everywhere. And also, why don't more of us in this country know about the power of food as it relates to preventing cancer and reversing cancer? Most physicians don't understand the power of a whole foods, plant-based, oil-free diet. Perhaps that's because back around 1800, the genetic mutation theory of cancer was proposed, and it has remained largely unquestioned even when it comes to treatment. Now, we know that cancer starts in genes, and a genetic mutation is almost uniformly bad for human health. Keep that in mind. You're going to need that little factoid later. But even though cancer does start in damaged genes, treatment can be so much more focused on more than that. In fact, Dr. Higginson, back in the 1960s, did population studies that correlated animal foods as a causation of cancer. In fact, Dr. Higginson went so far as to say that from his data in the population studies, he believed that 90% of all tumors were influenced by exogenous factors. Exogenous means not your genetics, coming from outside the body, such as the food, which he believed was the biggest of those exogenous factors. And regarding cancer, he said they are, quote, thus theoretically preventable, unquote. And then in the 1970s came Drs. Draysar and Irving, who published in the British Journal of Cancer that research that correlated animal foods with colon cancer and breast cancer. Which cancers first? It was colon and breast that were correlated with animal fats, which are saturated fats. Saturated fats mean solid at body temperature, and a lack of fiber. Remember that animal products have no fiber. Fiber comes only from plants. In 1982, the U.S. National Research Council published a seminal study that made this remarkable claim that supported Higginson's work back in the 60s. Diet is responsible, they said, for up to 70% of cancers. Their study was called Diet, Nutrition, and Cancer, and they said that diet is responsible for more cancer deaths than smoking. So let's help all people learn this, your family members, your physicians, the people who are willing to listen to you. This same report in 1982 concluded that genetic predisposition accounted for only 2 to 4% of avoidable cancer deaths. And I'm still quoting that same statistic today because it has not been disproved. Dr. T. Colin Campbell is a wonderful researcher from Cornell University, and I'm indebted to him for so much of the light that he has brought to this subject. Cow's milk causes breast cancer. A study of more than 52,000 women recently found that those using a quarter cup of cow's milk per day had a 30% increased risk of breast cancer. Increasing that cow's milk use to just 1 cup per day increased their risk to 50%, and those using 2 to 3 cups of cow's milk per day increased their risk by 80%, according to the study published in the International Journal of Epidemiology. Epidemiology, as you know, is the study of causes. And Dr. T. Colin Campbell is a PhD biochemist, nutritional biochemistry at Cornell University, and he was instrumental in bringing the China study to publication. In the China study, Chinese people in 65 different counties in China were studied, and total cancer rates in those 65 counties showed that 88.5% of male cancers and more than 80% of female cancers are avoidable. This study was published in Beijing, in Oxford, England, and by Cornell University Press. From the 1970s till now, numerous institutions have funded their studies, and they all agree diets high in animal protein and low in whole plant foods are responsible for more cancers. Many of the studies, I'll just list 5 of them here. There are so many studies saying this. It's very hard to make a presentation that fits into 1 hour because it's just hard to cut out so much good data. But in 1986, it was the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the USDA that together published their publication Nutrition Monitoring. In 97, it was an expert panel from the American Institute for Cancer Research and the World Cancer Research Foundation. In 1989, it was the National Research Council. In 1997, it was the World Health Organization. And in 2015, it was the American Cancer Society, agreeing that the more animal protein in the diet, the more cancer. But 4 decades ago, the former director of the United Nations Agency for Research on Cancer said that 80 to 90% of cancers are preventable. They're caused by dietary and environmental factors, he said. It's not just cancer, it's many other diseases that we could avoid if we avoided vegetable oils and animal foods, which promote hypertension. Hypertension is also called high blood pressure, and it's more than just salt and genetics that causes it. Vegetable oils in the diet and animal foods also promote heart attacks as well as diabetes type 2, and not to mention overweight. There is a high correlation between cancer comorbidities, those ills that I mentioned, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, and levels of serum cholesterol. They're all positively correlated with those diseases, animal foods in the diet, and the risks for cancer. Those with Western diseases, or we call them lifestyle diseases, are much more susceptible to cancer. In shining a light on cholesterol levels in the China study, Dr. Campbell helped us to understand that the most important factor was the serum cholesterol level in predicting who was going to have the other diseases, including cancer. The lower the serum cholesterol level in a range from 90 to 162, this is the factor that most correlated with a lack of disease. The less dietary animal foods, the lower the LDL. LDL is a type of cholesterol standing for low density lipoprotein, and this is, I'd nickname it L for lousy. The LDL is the artery plugger. And the lower the serum cholesterol, the more likely it was that there were more plants in the diet. And here's Sam Tyler, a handsome gentleman, to show us his before and after photos when he adopted a diet without meat, dairy, eggs, and oil. So, if it were just cancer that a plant-based diet prevented, that'd be worth it enough for me. But I find myself saving money and enjoying better health on a whole foods, plant-based, no-oil diet. Better than what? Better health than what? Better health than I could have had if I had kept the oil and animal products in my diet. Because when I switched to an oil-free, low-fat, plant-based diet, I reversed my lifelong asthma, and that was worth it to me. So, why should you listen to me? Not just because I've reversed my own asthma, but because I've had the privilege of watching firsthand how a whole foods plant-based diet can make cholesterol levels drop 100 points in 5 days. Not just at the practice that I ran for 14 years in this little building just south of Austin, Texas, but also, well, thanks to COVID-19, I no longer practice in that building, but you can still get the benefit of a food consult from me by phone at vegivore.com. If you want the free stuff, it's at drcarney.com, and I hope that you'll sign up for a free account because there's a lot of good stuff there. Plus, we'll give you a free viewing of my best-selling video, Why We Do What We Do, which helps us to control food cravings. How to turn on and turn off cancer genes with food? Dr. T. Colin Campbell showed us in his study where he fed casein to lab rats. Casein is the principal protein found in cow's milk. What he did was he had two groups, and one group had 20% of their calories from animal protein. That's comparable to the standard American diet, which gets 20% of its calories from animal protein. And that protein, he held it constant with one variable, and that was casein. And the group that had the same percentage of animal protein as the US diet got more cancers. The other group, with the far, far lower percentage of protein, did not get the cancers. And he published a wonderful summary to recap these things in 2017 in the Journal of Natural Sciences. Here it is in graph form. The more casein, the more cancer. I'm showing you just one of the groups at a time. In the next slide, I'll show you both groups compared. But the group that got the high casein, the 20% of their calories from protein is casein, they got the cancers. But in that same group of lab rats, when they gave that same group of lab rats the low protein diet, the cancers melted away as if they'd had surgery, chemotherapy, or radiation, but they didn't. It was just diet. When the same group of lab rats again had the 20% of their calories from casein, that animal protein, they got the cancers, but 20% more. When the casein was taken down to a very low level, again, the cancers shrunk away. And here you see the two groups compared, so that he had two separate groups, and it happened not just for that first group of lab rats, but for both groups. Wherever the casein was, the cancer genes were turned on to produce cancer. Wherever there was less casein, there was less cancer. This poem I love. It was written by Marianne Wesselman, who was at the Engine 2 immersion and who worked at the time at the Whole Foods Market in my hometown, Hinsdale, Illinois. The name of her poem is Yes, and it goes like this. Does animal protein cause cancer? Colin Campbell has the answer. Epigenetics is the hopeful science of how you can turn genes off if those genes are programmed to give you cancer or other diseases like diabetes type 2. Epigenetics modifies gene expression. So the gene can be there, it can be damaged, but it doesn't have to express itself in disease. And how does epigenetics do this? Via lifestyle habits. This permits disease reversal, which is also able to be passed down to your children. In science, we call that heritable. It puts cancer genes to sleep with food. Who am I quoting? I'm quoting me. That's my quote. Put your cancer genes to sleep with food, the proper food. It was Dr. Hans Diehl who I'm indebted to for teaching me these truths back in the 1980s. He ran the CHIP project, the Complete Health Improvement Program. He taught me that genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. A whole food plant-based diet can put your bad genetics to sleep too, so that you can outrun cancer and some of these other diseases before they start. So, what are the biochemical mechanisms whereby we can epigenetically modify cancer gene expression? How can we turn those cancer genes off? How can we put them to sleep? I'm not going to bore you with deep investigations into the DNA methylation, the histone modification, the non-coding RNA participation, but just suffice it to say that there's a lot of science out there, including this one published in 2015 in the journal Toxicological Science by 3 Italians whose names I love, Ravagnini, Samarini, and Angelini. And in 2016, Dr. Wu published in the journal Nature. And this was a really great study showing that, once again, cancer is 70 to 90% due to extrinsic factors. Extrinsic means not your genetics. In other words, you may have a strike against you genetically, but you can outrun it. This agreed with Dr. Higginson's work that he published back in the 60s. So let's list some of the many biochemical mechanisms, and we'll just explore them briefly, showing how cancer, food, and biochemistry are related, starting with sulfur and progressing to IGF-1 and TMAO, trimethylamine oxidase, advanced glycation end products, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, cholesterol, nitrosamines from the smoke in cooked meats, and statins. How are they related to cancer? Acrylamides when you deep fry plant foods. Excess estrogen, because estrogen is a growth promoter, and growth out of control is cancer. And then there are the heterocyclic amines and vitamin supplements. How could a good thing like a vitamin cause cancer when it's put into a supplement form? We're going to look at those factors, and we're going to look at the good things that plants do. Vegetables help us prevent cancer through isothiocyanates. When you chew the vegetables and the myrosinase in your saliva combines with the isothiocyanates, you make cancer-fighting properties that you don't get if you juice or smoothie-ize the food in a blender. Then there's the polyphenols and the antioxidants, the isoflavones from soy. There's inositol from the whole grains like brown rice. There's the flavonoids and carotenoids in the yellow and green vegetables, and the indoles and glucosinolates in the cruciferous leafy green vegetables, which are great at fighting cancer, probably the best in the vegetable world. Cancer, food, and biochemistry got a big boost from Dr. Dong just this year in February of 2020 when he published his study on the sulfur contained in amino acids. Dr. John Ritchie, who's a professor of public health sciences at Penn State College of Medicine, said, and I quote, "For decades it has been understood that diets restricting sulfur amino acids were what? They were associated with longevity in animals. And where do we get those sulfur amino acids? We get them primarily from animal products, which are more likely to have cysteine and methionine, the sulfur-containing amino acids." So again, quoting Dr. Ritchie, this study provides the first epidemiologic evidence, and what he means by that is this was done in humans, that excessive dietary intake of sulfur amino acids may be related to chronic disease outcomes in humans. And I'm also quoting him, high sulfur amino acid intake was associated with every type of food except grains, vegetables, and fruit. Hint, they're all plants. In other words, if you want a lot of acidity, you need to eat a lot of animal protein. Cancer and sulfur. So a lower internal pH, that's acidity, promotes the start of cancer as well as the worsening of cancer, making it act more deadly by acting at the molecular level. There's several mechanisms such as acting on adrenal glucocorticoid, acting on IGF-1, which we'll talk about later, dysregulating the cell metabolism, boosting osteoclast activity, and fat cell cytokine signaling. You've heard of cytokines this year if you've been keeping up with the news on COVID-19 and hearing about cytokine storms. Cancer and sulfur are related because the more animal food in the diet, the lower our pH, that means the more acidic our insides, and thus not only the more cancer, but also the more deadly the cancer. This postulate was supported by research from 1996, Dr. Martinez, who published in Clinical Experience of Metastases, in 2000 by Dr. Zhu in Cancer Research, in 2005 by Dr. Cato's publication in the Journal of Biological Chemistry. Let's switch to TMAO. Cheese, eggs, fish, and poultry have chemicals called choline and carnitine. And when we eat those, we can feed the choline and carnitine to our gut bacteria that turn those into TMA, trimethylamine, which could then be taken to the liver and oxidized into TMAO, trimethylamine oxidase. This is a dangerous chemical. In fact, even as Dr. T. Colin Campbell said that back in the early days when they did the China study, it was cholesterol that was the greatest marker for those more likely to have disease if the cholesterol was high. It's now TMAO. Now that we know about this one, it is so markedly carcinogenic and atherogenic. The more meat, the more TMAO and the more cancer. That's what Dr. Zhu published in 2015 in BMC Genomics. If we eat a whole food plant-based diet long enough, though, the good news is we can change our gut microbiome by feeding them fiber, which is their food, and fiber is only found in plants. We can't digest fiber, but the bacteria in our gut can. And if you change your gut bacteria over to being the plant-digesting gut bacteria instead of the animal protein digesting gut bacteria, now you become unable to make those high levels of TMAO. It's great and it's protective. And that's one of the many reasons why I stick to a plant-based diet. Let's switch to polyaromatic hydrocarbons. A PAH is associated with skin cancer, lung cancer, bladder, liver, stomach cancers, and it's also atherogenic. Atherosclerosis is the progressive plugging of the arteries with fat, causing stroke and cancer. The examples of polyaromatic hydrocarbons include naphthalene, anthracene, and benzopyrene. This is found in the smoke from cooked meats, as well as the smoke from cigarettes. And we know that secondhand cigarette smoke is associated with more cancers in the family members of smokers, even if those family members who are getting the secondhand smoke are not smokers themselves. In 2012, in February, it was Dr. Chen and his colleagues that published in the journal Science of the Total Environment, and they said, quote, carcinogenic potencies of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons for backdoor neighbors of restaurants with cooking emissions. That was the title of their study. Who knew that if even you just lived near a restaurant that cooked meat, you could have more lung cancer? Airborne nitrosamines from the smell of cooked meat damage DNA. They cause mutations, with frying bacon 15 times worse mutagenic than beef. But there's no mutagenicity from frying soy. Now, I'm not advocating that you fry your soy, but hey, it's good to know. And this is perhaps why in 1995, Thibaud and in 1999, Dr. Leginsky both found increased respiratory tract cancers among cooks, more lung cancer, more head and neck cancer, sinus, throat. Nitrosamines in the smoke of cooked meat are the most carcinogenic agents in cigarette smoke. If you compare the amount of nitrosamines in 4 hot dogs, that's more than the nitrosamines you get from smoking a pack of 20 cigarettes. The nitrosamines in smoked food are as follows, with ham coming in at about 21.3, turkey breast 26.7. Now that's almost half of the 47. That's the upper limit of normal for safety. Barbecue chicken has more than that 47, but fish is the worst. Smoked salmon, we call it lox. A bagel with lox will give you more than 10 times the amount of the upper limit of safety. Now, what about liquid smoke? Well, it captures the flavor molecules, which are water-soluble, without capturing or storing much of the cancer-causing compounds, which are fat-soluble. So hickory-flavored liquid smoke has only 0.8, and mesquite has 1.1. Dr. Greger, to whom I'm indebted, says that you'd have to drink 3 bottles of liquid smoke a day to come up to the upper limit of normal at 47. Nitrosamines in smoked food are well studied. I know this slide is impossible to read, but I'm just showing you there's a lot of references out there showing how deadly it is to have even the smell of cooked meat in your home. And research from Dr. Stitch's study from clear back in 1984, but as relevant as Dr. Campillo's science from 2011 using gas chromatography as well as mass spectrometry, showed this, including the cooked fish carcinogen, FIP. FIP is a breast cancer carcinogen from fish, chicken, and fried bacon. It triggers cancer through DNA mutations. It promotes growth through estrogenic activity. Without estrogen, no fetus would grow, no breast would grow, no cancer would grow. And FIP increases the invasiveness, making cancer way more likely to become metastatic. FIP is a deadly heterocyclic amine, and that has been substantiated by the research of Lauber and also Rohrman, who published in 2009. Fermented foods, hey, don't throw rotten tomatoes at me, but fermented foods also have nitrosamines. And so I'm going to quote Dr. Paula Jackson published in 2004, volatile nitrosamines appear to be the primary agent in the carcinogenic process. Nitrosamines are often found in salted, pickled, and or fermented foods. Cancer is also created when you deep fry plants by the creation of acrylamides. Acrylamides from deep-fried plants, hello French fries, are associated with more than 7 times the odds of breast cancer through the inflammatory process, which is well known to be associated with breast cancer development and other kinds of cancer, such as prostate cancer, according to the studies at the University of Washington. And don't forget AGEs, advanced glycation end products. Advanced glycation end products are associated with premature aging and disease, and they're associated with cancer. Dr. David Schroeder in 2018 published in Current Pharmaceutical Design, and he said, quote, AGEs, when accumulated in tissues, significantly increase the level of inflammation in the body, which has long been associated with the development of cancer. And then there's IGF-1, and IGF-1 is a growth promoter, but you see my friend Shirley shrinking here because she switched to a plant-based diet, which gives you a lot less IGF-1. Insulin-like growth factor 1 is a cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in malignant tumor acquisition, so the start of cancer, or progression, the spread of cancer. The less IGF-1, the less cancer. IGF-1 levels are increased by eating animal proteins like meat, egg white, and dairy. According to Epic Oxford, one of the largest prospective studies on diet and cancer. And basically, to summarize what they say, the less animal protein in the diet, the less IGF-1. How much less? Well, middle-agers with high protein intakes, such as in the standard American diet, or even worse, in ketogenic diets or Paleolithic diets, had 75% increased overall mortality and a 4 times more increased risk of dying from cancer specifically. They came out with this very arresting headline when they published this study: that chicken wing you're eating could be as deadly as a cigarette. 4 times the risk of cancer is equivalent to the risk of cancer death from smoking. Cancer loves cholesterol. In fact, cancer cells feed on cholesterol, which is chemically similar to estrogen, a growth promoter. LDL cholesterol, L for low-density lipoprotein, but also for lousy, the one that plugs up the arteries, it increases the proliferation of breast cancers, according to Dr. Kitahara, who published in 2011. Here's a diagram showing you the similarities between estrogen, cholesterol, testosterone, and progesterone. Cholesterol looks like estrogen. Here, the estrogen form is estradiol. And you can see that they all have in common a sterol backbone. That's that chain of carbon rings. Dietary cholesterol, which is only found in eggs and dairy and fish and animal products, basically, because plants can't make cholesterol, it over-estrogenizes a man, suppressing his testosterone levels and increasing his risk of cancer. Does the same thing for women. And 1 in 4 women in the U.S. take statins to lower their serum cholesterol level. But these statins are associated with cancer. According to Dr. Undila's 2012 study, Women taking statins for more than 10 years had more than double the risk of breast cancer. Both kinds, invasive ductal and invasive lobular breast cancer. Vegetables have so many good things in them, including anthocyanins, that vegetables are key in the prevention and the reversal of cancer. And that's why I eat veggies for breakfast. The whole food plant-based diet can be compared to a vegan diet. Now, both of them lack animal products in the diet, but they're not the same. If a vegan diet is healthy, and it certainly is, then why isn't being vegan enough? What aspect of healthy food do Americans not get enough of? That's what the suffering people need to ask, especially those suffering cancer. Because what they're not getting enough of is our friend fiber. Fiber is only found in unprocessed plants. There's two kinds, soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber stabilizes glucose levels, so it's good for diabetics, and it lowers cholesterol. Soluble fiber is found in whole grains like oats and millet and brown rice. It swells up in water when you cook it. Insoluble fiber cleans your colon, prevents constipation and thereby varicose veins. It's preventing that too. And it fills you full, but it adds no calories. Therefore, fiber is not only the weight loss wonder, but it's the cancer preventer also. But there's no fiber in animal foods. No fiber in eggs, meat, chicken, turkey, fish, or oils, which are not animal products, but are a fat removed from its fiber, a processed fat. There's no fiber in dairy products such as yogurt, cheese, and ice cream. Fiber is the estrogen sponge. Excess estrogen promotes cancer because estrogen is a growth promoter. There's no fiber in animal foods, and so the less fiber, the more disease. The less fiber, the less testosterone, and the more cancer. As Heather and Tim Kaufman show us, the more fiber, the easier it is to lose weight. Check out his wonderful website at fatmanrants.com. This graph that I made with the 4 different stomachs showing various levels of being full show you that what makes the full, satisfied tummy is fiber and water in the food. So don't process the food and take it out like this stomach that has just oil, but the same amount of calories as that stomach way over there. This stomach is just too concentrated in calories. I want you to get satisfied, to fill your tummy, eat more, and weigh less, and have a lower risk of cancer. I've put it in graphical form here according to my Starch Smart system, which shows you that some foods have very few calories per pound of food, and some foods have a whole lot of calories per pound of food. Oil has more than 4,000 calories per pound of food. Why is eating oil, which is a vegan food, so harmful to our health? Why do cancer patients need to know about it? This graph is a simplistic way of showing you that the most concentrated of foods are oils. The standard American diet is too high in fat. The meat, dairy, eggs, and oil that we eat make the fat that we wear. This is a corollary to Dr. John McDougall's favorite saying, his famous saying, the fat that we eat becomes the fat that we wear. And the fat that we wear lowers a man's testosterone, lowers a woman's testosterone too, and it leads to disabilities. Here's Heather before and after she adopted a plant-based diet without meat, dairy, eggs, and oil. She's my beautiful friend. She was beautiful before, but she's transformed into a much healthier Heather after adopting a plant-based diet. How much fat is too much fat? When dietary fat in the food represents more than 20% of our calories, we may become insulin resistant, diabetic, hypertensive, high cholesterol. The timing of our meals also matters. Did you know that the studies show that there was less cancer recurrence when the biggest meal of the day was in the morning and the smaller meal of the day was in the evening? They achieved more weight loss it was the subject of several scientific studies that researched this timing of meals and cancer recurrence. There was less cancer recurrence, better sleep at night, more body fat loss, and more muscle gain when the evening meal was the smaller meal. So what should our goals be? Let's be 100% plant-based. Let's strive for less than 20% of our total calories from fat. We should eat whole foods that are unprocessed, which means minimal loss of water, no modification of the fiber. We should limit added sugars, fats, and salts. And when eating grains, eat only whole grains. Don't forget the importance of sleep. It's the unsung hero of cancer reversal. So my simple suggestion is to be in bed before 10, because 2 hours of sleep before midnight are worth 4 hours of sleep after midnight when it comes to fighting cancer, as well as helping you lose weight. Eat unprocessed and exercise daily. Walking is great. Exercise is very anti-cancer. And we're going to talk about, I'll tell you right now, it's IGF-1. Remember we said it was a growth promoter? When you lift weight, let's say you're exercising your biceps, IGF-1, which is a growth promoter, is produced in the bicep to make that muscle bigger when you're lifting weight that involves the biceps. But the IGF-1 in the growing biceps sends out a signal for the rest of the body, dampening down the IGF-1 everywhere else. It's as if it's calling to the body, hey, all the IGF-1 needs to be here because she's making me lift that weight again. Avoid animal protein, avoid dietary oil. Oil is a fat removed from its fiber. And Barbara knows that before she gave up meat, dairy, eggs, and oil, she was able to make her living impersonating Liza Minnelli. But after she gave up meat, dairy, eggs, and oil, look at her now. Let's see this transformation again, before and after. And I want to help you with the free resources available on drcarney.com, the blogs and the articles that are in depth. There's a community where you can blog yourself if you want to, or help others in the support groups. There's scientific abstracts if you want to make presentations like these. And I hope that you'll sign up for a free membership at drcarney.com so you can get your free viewing of why we do what we do. Whole food plant-based diets have fiber, and the more fiber in the food, the better the hormone balance. Fiber is a sponge that removes estrogen, according to Dr. Rose in 1991. It's like a paper towel called Bounty, the quicker picker-upper. The less fiber in the diet, the more estrogen, therefore the more growth promotion towards growth out of control, such as cancer, and the less testosterone. Fiber is an estrogen sponge, and the more fiber in the diet, the more estrogen excreted in the stool, according to Dr. Aries, who studied the estrogen content of stool in 1972. Aren't you glad that wasn't your research project? Let's nourish the endothelium, the velvety lining of our arteries, with dark leafy greens, which are scientifically proven to nourish the endothelial cell, resulting in maximum artery dilation for better blood flow. Cancer thrives when blood flow is compromised. That's why atherosclerosis and high cholesterol levels go along with cancer. What's the most widespread addiction all over the whole world? Is it the tobacco that we know causes cancer? Is it the alcohol that we know is associated with much greater cancer risks? No, the most common addiction is our addiction to unhealthy foods. How do I define unhealthy food? Too high in fat, with more than 20% of the calories from fat, and containing animal protein. I want to be healthy by choice, not by chance, but I don't judge anybody for what they eat. But I choose to eat beans, greens, squash, and yams for breakfast. We call that the Starch Smart system. I try to get that eaten by 8 a.m. I try to eat the biggest meal of my day as breakfast. So connect with me if you want some customized help through a Vegivore phone consult, or sign up for your free account at drcarney.com, where you'll learn fantastic tips about chips, making them in the microwave without any oil at all, crispy. You'll learn about people who are very influential and who are influencing through their plant-based diets. This is Eric Adams, president of the Borough of Brooklyn, who doesn't eat meat, dairy, eggs, or oil. I want to help you succeed by giving you various resources to help the people in your world achieve their very, very best health when you share with them these DVDs, which you can buy to support my work or rent. They come as physical DVDs or streaming video. This is my bestseller, but there's also one for diabetes, high blood pressure, and of course cancer prevention and women's health. There's this one about cardiovascular disease, stroke, and heart attack. Perfect health requires perfect circulation. And there's this one with all those other questions about vitamin supplements and water, and get your questions answered. We're going to run through in our remaining few minutes a few studies showing that the less animal protein, the less estrogen, and the less breast cancer, according to lower rates of breast cancer among the vegan women in the Adventist Health Study 2, published by Tantamano Bartley and colleagues. There's more animal protein and more estrogen and more breast cancer documented in the Four Corners breast cancer study. In 2009, Dr. Wu showed us scientifically how fish in the diet raises estrogen and increases the risk for cancer in Asian American women. Dr. Dong in 2011 published how more fiber makes less estrogen imbalance and less breast cancer. The largest source of estrogens is dietary, according to Dr. Malakinejad in 2015. He said the Western diet, 60 to 70% of animal-derived estrogens come from dairy products. There's evidence that taking omega-3 supplements can lead to an aggressive form of prostate cancer. And supplements, which are an $11 billion industry, it's very important to understand that if a little bit of something is good when it's in the whole food plant-based form, a whole lot of it in a supplement form may be harmful, such as vitamin E, which increases the risk of hemorrhagic stroke by 74%, and vitamin A, which increases the risk of liver cancer. Why should we not use multivitamin supplements? Vitamin E, vitamin A have clear-cut increased risks of serious diseases such as cancer and stroke. Folic acid increases the breast cancer risk 153%, as well as the prostate cancer risk by 153%. Folic acid is in supplement form, but folate comes in the whole plant food. Folate is good, folic acid in supplement form, not good. Should you get your vitamin B12 levels tested? I think you should. B12 only is made by bacteria, and you don't want to take it if you don't need it, but if you're on a whole food plant-based diet and not taking it in, you may need it, especially if you're drinking caffeine or alcohol, which act as diuretics and push those water-soluble vitamins right out of your system. The National Cancer Institute scientists studied more than 29,000 male smokers for 5 to 8 years and published in the New England Journal of Medicine back in 1994. They said that in plant food form, beta-carotene decreases the risk for cancer by 19%, but in pill form, vitamin A increases the risk for lung cancer by 18% and all-cause mortality by 8%. The famous surgeon, Dr. Dennis Burkitt, showed us that the less fiber, the more disease. And Dr. Golden published in the journal Cancer in 1994, and he said the less fiber, the more estrogen. Why is that important? Estrogen is the growth promoter. The less fiber in the diet, the more breast cancer. The less fiber in the diet, the worse the imbalance of excess estrogen, according to Dr. Rose in 1991. Insufficient estrogen removal is what the standard American diet gives us, according to Dr. King, who in 2008 published that the Western diet cannot bind estrogen to fiber, so it's going to permit reabsorption of estrogen into the system, increasing your risk for cancer. Growth out of control, that's what estrogen does, according to Dr. Russo in 2006, when he studied estrogen and breast cancer. A high dietary fat raises the estrogen and raises the risk of estrogen-related cancers, according to Dr. Farvid, who in 2014 told us about dietary fat relating to the nurses in the Harvard Nurses Health Study 2. A high dietary fat increased their risk for breast cancer 18%, and if they were over menopause, postmenopausal women, by 21%. The problems of estrogen dominance are that it causes more cancer in men as well as women. So what causes more estrogen inside our bodies? Dairy is the biggest factor, and eating too much fat, even if it's plant-based. But wearing too much fat also increases our body load of estrogen, because every fat cell in our body is a factory for estrogen. Eating cholesterol raises estrogen, and now you know why, because you saw the diagram showing how similar in chemical structure estrogen and cholesterol are. The lack of fiber in our diet, it increases estrogen because we don't have that fiber sponge to soak up the excess estrogen and carry it out with the stool. Animal feed contains hormones and antibiotics that increase the estrogen level, and if we're drinking caffeine or alcohol, it leads to excess estrogen levels, which could lead to cancer. An oil is not the same as a dietary fat. An oil is a fat removed from its fiber by the refining process, whether that refining is cold extraction or heat extraction. When 20% of our calories or less come from fats, the diet is said to be a low-fat diet, and low-fat diets are associated with less cancer. I eat olives sparingly, but not olive oil. Why is eating oil so harmful to our health? There's no fiber in it. It's just too dense in calories. It's 100% fat. There's no protein or carbohydrate, so it's easily stored as adipose. It promotes acid reflux and fatigue. It hurts the endothelial cell, leading to stroke and heart attack. It promotes cancers by raising estrogen. It promotes inflammation, so there comes your arthritis. It's atherogenic, raising your cholesterol levels. Cholesterol is a lipid. And it's addicting, making it much more easy to overeat. But Natalie knows the difference. She knows that eating a diet without meat, dairy, eggs, and oil helped her achieve what she wanted. This beautiful movie, Eating You Alive, is one that I recommend. If you haven't seen it, get onto the website, eatingyoualive.com, and take a look at it. And why should you listen to me? Other than the fact that I reversed my own asthma after giving up the meat, dairy, eggs, and oil, I was able to watch a whole food plant-based diet make a significant difference in the cholesterol levels, dropping 100 points for some of my patients in just 5 days. Not only here, where I practiced medicine for 14 years just south of Austin, Texas, and where you can still access my expertise at veggievore.com through the phone consults, but also on drcarney.com, you can get the free resources. So sign up so you can see the free gift that I'm offering. But it's because I was able to see it firsthand when Rip Esselstyn hired me as the Engine 2 Immersion Medical Director. Rip gave up his lucrative career winning triathlons, which he did for the University of Texas, and his career as a firefighter in Austin, Texas, and became the CEO of the Engine 2 Immersions, which are now changed their name to Engine 2 Retreats and are held in Sedona, Arizona. He's the son of Caldwell Esselstyn Jr., MD, who is in this wonderful movie, Forks Over Knives. If you haven't seen it, please take a look at this movie. It effectively promotes food as medicine. Rip hired me for the employees of Whole Food Market who came through the Engine 2 immersion, and we saw fantastic Engine 2 results in just 1 week. Blood pressures dropped to normal for many of them, even though I wasn't adding in blood pressure medicine. Blood sugars normalized for most participants, even though I was decreasing their medications. Cholesterol and triglyceride levels dropped, even though I wasn't adding in cholesterol-lowering medications. And many of them decided they would stop their medications during the week, even though I didn't ask them to do that, and they still dropped their cholesterol. Weight dropped almost 1 pound a day, while the participants were eating all that they wanted and loving the food. It's true, they found that if you're seeking the bacon, you may be mistaken. They found that it was better not to risk it for the brisket. Connect with me, and I hope that you'll sign up at Veggievore for a phone consult so that I can help you reach your goals too. Remember, a revolution starts with one.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. A wise man once said, "You make a new life by making new choices." Now, if you know that what you eat matters, if you know that health comes from healthy living, then the time to make new choices is now. And just imagine owning the summit for life. Click the button for more. Maybe you know our stories. Luke and I lost family to cancer, and we wish we would have known sooner what you are learning here today. So please, share the summit, take action, and let's support each other. Thank you. This is Toby and Luke signing off, and we can't wait to see you for the next presentation.